Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Korn, and I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for UC San Diego, and I'm part of the Information Technology Services Department. I want to thank you all for taking time today for attending. The topic we're going to be talking about is an important one and a serious one: how to protect yourself from identity theft. I, like I suspect most of you, have been trying to decide how to respond with the knowledge that my data is now on the dark web and thus in the hands of criminals. But today's talk is not going to be a general talk about identity theft. What we are going to talk about explicitly are the steps that I recommend you take to protect yourself now that your data has been involved in a data breach. And even if your data was not involved in a breach, I would still recommend these same steps be followed. Now, there's a couple things we're not going to talk about today. I noticed in the questions that were submitted, many of you asked questions about the data breach itself that took place at OP, the Accellion data breach. There is an extensive amount of material online at UCOP. The website there can be a little tricky to navigate, so we've provided links to all of the relevant material about the breach itself at the URL cybersecurity.ucsd.edu. And questions about the breach, many of you still have them, should be sent to communications@ucop.edu. And I can tell you from personal experience, they've gotten much more responsive. So if you've sent something in the past and not gotten a satisfactory answer, or it took too long, try again. They're getting much more responsive. So that's encouraging. Now, what we are going to talk about today, we live in a world where there are all sorts of dangers in our regular life, but we don't all go hide under a rock in fear. We learn how to embrace the world despite the dangers of it. Now, when it comes to identity theft, what we're going to do today is talk about the very specific steps you can take so you can learn how to live in the modern digital world, the online world, despite the fact that your data is exposed out there. What we want you to do, or what I really want you to feel when this talk is over, that you're empowered to take back control of and achieve a kind of sense of, I won't say comfort, but confidence that what you're doing is going to protect you from the worst of the consequences of a data breach. Now, some of you probably weren't involved in the data breach, but I want to point out, and I don't want to diminish the significance of what happened, but what happened at OP is happening all over the place these days. In our modern digital economy, your data is being handled by dozens, hundreds, thousands of companies, and much of it's being repackaged and resold to other companies. Those companies get hacked and your data gets exposed. This is a very common thing these days, and that's why I'm really going to encourage you to try to follow through with as many of the steps I'm going to go through, even if you weren't part of the OP data breach. Now, some of you may believe that you have already been a victim of identity theft. And I want to point out, identity theft doesn't mean your data has been released out on the dark web. The event that happened at OP isn't what we traditionally call identity theft. Identity theft is when someone uses your identity to try to obtain something like a credit card or a loan, or they take out some sort of, open some sort of financial account they can benefit from, such as getting access to your financial accounts and draining them. If you believe there has been fraudulent use of your identity as a result of this incident, there are three things we're going to ask you to do. The first thing is, we're going to presume you've signed up for the Experian Identity Works service. Call the number that I have on here, 877-890-9332. They have a bank of people that are experts in helping you resolve an identity theft crisis. Take advantage of it. It's one of the best features of the identity or the credit monitoring service that is being provided as part of this. The next step is one some of you are going to go, wait a second, you want me to do what? File an FBI crime report. And the link for doing that is on here as well, www.ic3.gov. Now, you're probably saying, why should I do that? What's going to happen? Is Fox Mulder going to show up at my door? No, the reason we want you to do that is the FBI, well, they get tens of thousands of these requests a year and can't investigate all of them. When enough people file a report and mark it as, in our case, part of the University of California Accellion data breach, their system will connect those reports together, making it appear to be part of a larger problem. And that will get more of their attention than just a one-off. If I have a loan taken out in my name and I lose $500, the FBI doesn't have the resources to investigate every $500 loss. But if 1,000 people do that, suddenly we're talking a lot of money and they start paying more attention. And then finally, the university wants to know if this is happening. We want to know if you've been a victim of identity theft for two reasons. One, so that we can warn the community that we're seeing these kinds of events, but also we can apply pressure through our own avenues to the FBI, to OP, to help resolve the crime. So we've set up an email address called identitytheft@ucsd.edu. And if you believe, again, this is not an email address for just general questions, but if you believe you have been the victim of identity theft, please send a report, just a short statement as to what happened, to that address. That email will go to my office, who will simply track it. It will also be sent to UCSD police, who will triage it and see what they can do. And a copy of it will go up to OP, to the people handling the Accellion breach. So again, we've created a single website for this kind of information, identitytheft.ucsd.edu. It has these steps on it. And it also has a very short, almost bullet point summary of this entire talk. So I'm going to give you a lot of information today. I'm going to talk for probably 35 to 40 minutes, and then we'll turn to questions. If you're taking notes, that's great. If you don't want to take notes, we will put this online so you can view it later. And again, the identity theft website has a lot of useful information that you can use as a shortcut. So let's dive into it. I'm going to go through about a little more than a dozen things I'd like you to do. And you'll notice how I phrased that. You have to decide what are the right steps for you. But I'm going to tell you what I have done and what in the 20 years I've been doing this, my professional experience tells me you should be doing to protect yourself from identity theft. So what I've done out of that dozen or so items we'll talk about in detail is I've given you here the 7 that I think are utterly critical. Sign up for the Experian credit monitoring service, set either a credit alert or a credit freeze. You can sign up for a My Social Security account. We'll talk about that in detail. You can protect yourself from taxpayer fraud by getting an identity protection pin from the IRS, very valuable. Contact your banks and other financial institutions and ask them what they can do to monitor your accounts for unusual activities. Again, we'll go into more detail on all of these. Enable two-factor authentication on all your personal accounts. Let me just interject here. The breach put your personal information, your personal accounts at risk. It doesn't really put your UCSD accounts at risk. So it's your personal accounts that we'll talk about in quite a bit of detail. And then ignore all those spam and scam calls and text messages you're getting from unknown contacts. So that's my short list, but we'll go through this in great detail now. So we're going to talk first about credit reports and credit monitoring. Then we're going to talk about how you protect your personal accounts. We'll go a little bit in the weeds and some other stuff you may want to do. And then most importantly, I think we'll talk about how we can support each other through this challenge. Okay, let's dive in. Pencil sharpened. First, let's talk about credit monitoring. UCOP is offering free credit monitoring, as most of you know, to everyone who has been involved in the data breach. Everyone they know has been involved will have received at least an email and possibly a US mail notification. Those US mail notifications started to go out at the end of June. I think they've all been sent, but I'm not positive. If you did not receive a notification, then your data was not included in the breach. Now, I'm going to tell you, most of what I'm going to explain to you today is still valuable to you for the reason I mentioned earlier, that whether your data was included in this data breach or not, there's a reasonable chance some of your data has been breached through other companies at some point in time. Now, there is a number that you can call for assistance signing up with Experian. I gave it a call last night just to see how well it went. It's improved an order of magnitude since when the breach first happened. I got someone who is knowledgeable, friendly, and I only waited about 30 seconds before she picked up the phone. So I was very encouraged by that. Now, one of the questions that we've gotten a lot related to this is, should you go out and buy additional credit monitoring? And especially if you didn't get a notification, should you go buy credit monitoring? My personal advice is that if you have been a victim of identity theft in the past or currently, you should have credit monitoring, whether you have to pay for it for yourself or not. If you're unwilling to freeze your credit report, I think you should buy credit monitoring. And we'll talk about what a freeze means in a minute. And if you're unwilling to check your credit reports once in a while, I believe you should sign up, even if you have to pay for it, for a credit monitoring service. So the one other fact or little item I'll toss in here is, before you go sign up on your own, check with your bank and your financial institution. Many financial institutions offer you access to your credit reports for free, on demand. And some of them, especially the big national firms, even offer discounted or free credit monitoring. So take a look at that, but this is a really important thing for you to do. When identity theft takes place, and you may not even know it's taken place, there's a good chance that information will show up on your credit report. So let's talk about a credit alert versus a credit freeze. They're both very effective. A credit alert basically, so let me back up. When someone goes to take out, say, a credit card in your name, or take out a loan in your name, which is classic identity theft, they're masquerading as you and trying to get access to money, or a credit card they can spend money with. What happens is the person they've made that application to, the company, will check your credit to make sure you're worthy of handing out that loan or that credit card to, from their perspective. If a credit alert has been placed on your file, then they get an alert that says, please double check the identity of the person taking out the loan or applying for the credit card. The beauty of a credit alert is that you only have to set it with one of the major credit bureaus, and it will propagate to the others. So it's very effective, it's very fast, it's very easy. Now, if you set a credit freeze, what happens is anyone who tries to access your credit report to see if they can give you a loan, for example, they won't be able to get to your credit report. It'll be stopped, which means that any legitimate financial institution will not open that account, provide that credit card, provide that loan to someone when they can't check your credit. So a credit freeze is terrifically powerful. The challenge with a credit freeze is that it's terrifically powerful. So if you go to take out a mortgage or buy a car or lease an apartment, they won't be able to check your credit report and they'll probably deny you. You'll have to go lift that freeze until that transaction is done and then place it again. And to make matters a little more painful, you have to set a credit freeze with all 3 credit bureaus. You do it with one, that's great, but it's still, your credit is available on those other ones. So this is not really a suggestion. I'm telling you, in my personal opinion, it's just a personal opinion, that if you're worried about identity theft, doing one of these 2 things today is the smartest thing you can do. If you're at high risk of identity theft, you're a high income position, I would definitely consider a credit freeze. I've had a credit freeze in place for years because I've had my information lost in various breaches over the years. So this is the one everyone's going to roll their eyes at. Should you, check your credit reports? The answer is yes, you should check your credit reports. Now, I went looking out there for some data on how often people actually do this. And I found this nice little chart. And if you look at it quickly, it looks like, roughly around 80% of the people do check their credit report once in a while. Well, you'd be wrong. Those are the people that responded to the survey. The truth is only 1/3 of Americans have checked their credit report in the last year, and that's dropping. And what that means is that we have 150, 200 million people who have no idea what's on their credit report. Now, the good news is it's very easy. It's by law, you're entitled to get a copy of your credit report for free from all of the 3 major credit bureaus every 12 months. You can go to annualcreditreport.com or call this phone number. However, because there has been so much identity theft, at the moment, you can actually get your credit report every week from annualcreditreport.com. Now, do I recommend you check it every week? That seems a little obsessive, I admit. If you've been in the middle of an identity theft event, you probably do want to check it that often. If you're trying to make sure you don't have any problems, I normally look at mine every 2-3 months. I've been doing it a little more lately. But one thing I want to emphasize is that there will be mistakes on your credit report. It is worth checking your credit report, even if there's no evidence of identity theft. I found, for example, after my father passed away, that he had been listing me on all of his financial documents as a co-signer. I didn't know this. So when I checked my credit report one day, I discovered that I was a signee on his lease in his retirement home. He rented a car, he put my name down. All of this stuff appeared on my credit report that was frankly lowering my credit score and had nothing to do with me, not really. And I was able to get it removed. So spend some time, do this. And again, check with your banks. They may provide these to you for free, aside from what you get from annualcreditreport.com. So this is one that I want to spend a little time on because I'm not sure everyone realizes they can do this. You should, and I mean this strongly, call your bank, call your financial institutions, have a conversation with them and say, you know that your personal data was recently released as part of a data breach, and you would like to set fraud alerts on your account. Now, most of them, especially the large national chains, make this very easy to do. You can usually log into your online account and set some of these alerts yourself very easily. If you're not comfortable doing that, just call them and explain what happened. Find out what alerts they offer. Most of them, especially the bigger companies, offer what's called a unusual activity alert. And what that alert is they literally have a system that watches your account for the pattern of your purchases, and they'll say, hey, this doesn't look right. So last year, for example, I got a lovely call from a credit card saying, Mr. Korn, did you buy $97 worth of Slim Jims at a gas station in Arkansas last week? And I said, why I didn't. And they go, why, we're going to send you a new credit card. So you've all probably experienced something like that, but many banks will do that kind of monitoring for you as well. So have that conversation with them and make sure that alert is going on. Make sure that there's also an alert set for when your profile changes. And by profile, I mean your home address, your cell phone number, your email address. This is a very common way that identity thieves work. They get into your account, they change the mailing address, they change the email address, they change the phone number, and now they can verify that they're you in ways that are pretty nefarious. I also personally have set a large purchase alert so that if a large purchase is made, I'm notified of it. I actually set that pretty low to like $70 because I just want to know if money's going out. And a low balance alert is useful to make sure no one cleans out your account. So go into your financial institution, have this conversation. And again, you'll be surprised sometimes what fraud alert protections they offer. sometimes for free, sometimes at a discount. So put a little time into it and give it a shot. So we can take a breath now for a second. I want to just change gears for a second, put your pencils down, relax. I probably just made you very nervous. You're all going, oh my God, I got to do all this work. It's not that bad. You don't have to do it immediately. Do as much as you can. But one thing I want to emphasize, I could do this talk 40 times. I could send 90 campus emails, and it's not going to have the impact you have. We have right now almost 800 people listening to this talk. If each of you spend 2 minutes and share the identitytheft.ucsd.edu link with your colleagues and coworkers or your family, that would be more powerful than all these talks I could possibly do. Discuss with your colleagues and your friends what you're doing and what you learned today. Spend 10 minutes at a staff meeting discussing it with your colleagues. And there are a lot of people that are very stressed over this. They find it very anxious, the thought that their data or their family's data is out there in criminal hands. And that's a perfectly reasonable way to feel. So support your colleagues by listening to them, empathizing with them. But again, discuss what you're learning today and what you've done, because nothing helps relieve that anxiety than doing something about it, regaining control. And don't forget that there are several resources available to you as members of the UCSD community for free. We've got a faculty staff assistance program, which is terrific. There's, of course, the student counseling program. And we have a great LGBT center here on campus with their own sets of resources. So be aware of these. If you're feeling the pressure, consider taking advantage of one of these programs. It can't hurt, and it may help quite a bit. So let's dive back in. So now I'm going to make the most work for you. You'll notice this next section is all about protecting your personal accounts. Again, what I said earlier, your UCSD accounts are actually very well protected. I'm very proud of the tools we have put into place to prevent account takeover. All of you have experienced the rollout of two-step authentication. We also are in a situation where if someone gets a hold of, say, your email account, that's bad for the university, but it's not your personal information really that's getting out there. It's your personal accounts out in your real life outside of the university that I'm most concerned about. And that's what we're going to talk about now. So the Social Security Administration, maybe if you're half my age, you're not worrying about this yet, but you should. The Social Security Administration has a lovely tool called My Social Security. It's an account you can create on the Social Security Administration website, and it gives you access to information about your payments into Social Security, how much you'll get when you retire. I'm apparently going to have to work till I'm 106, as it turns out. But the information is very nice. Now, why do I want you to go sign up for this account? Because I want you to go sign up for it before a criminal goes and signs up for it. It is possible using, for some of us, the information that was exposed during the breach to get enough information about a person that you could probably create a My Social Security account. And what we want you to do here is set this up so that it's your account before a criminal does. So it's not that hard. It takes a few minutes. Go do it. Do it tonight after dinner. And then tell people about it. I think that's very helpful. Now, the other thing to point out, when you do set up an account like this with the government, you want to make sure it's secure and not going to be hacked. And they've got a nice feature called Extra Security. When you log into the site, you'll see it. The page looks like this: My Home Message Center and Security Settings. And if you click on the Security Settings tab, you'll see there's a security option, Select Extra Security. What that means is it's going to require basically two-step authentication just to access this. And you really have to have it for something like this, because this is a portal into who you are from the perspective of the government. And we want to make sure that stays with whom it should be. There's a similar program over with the IRS. Now, truthfully, if I had to choose between the IRS site and the SSA site, I would use the IRS site. And the reason is the notion of taxpayer fraud has been exploding for the last 4, 5, 6 years. And where that is where somebody goes to the IRS and files a bogus tax return using your SSN, your name, your information, and then they get a refund. And people usually only find out about this when they try to go file and discover someone else has already filed for them. This is very common, and the IRS responded intelligently by creating this thing called an Identity Protection Pin. It's basically a secret they have, you have, and you use it when you file your tax return. Now, for mysterious reasons, it used to be they'd only give you one of these if you had suffered identity theft. Starting this year, they changed it so you can opt into the program in advance. It's wonderful. It's very effective. It largely stops this kind of fraud. So what I'm going to tell you, and this will take a little more work because again, you have to verify your identity to them. Go to this URL. We have this on the identity theft website. Follow the information there. Set up this PIN and don't lose it. Keep it highly confidential. But this is one of the most important things you can do to cut off a very common form of identity theft. So another one that people don't think about very much, but I want to talk about for a minute, is protecting your cell phone number. There's this notion of porting a number. The term porting means you're moving a cell phone number from the control of one cell provider to another. So if I'm an AT&T customer and I'm moving to Verizon, from the AT&T perspective, they're porting my number over to Verizon to control. Well, you can think for a second about how devastating this could be. If somebody were to claim your cell phone number without you knowing about it, now they would be getting the text messages of those pins that you're getting, the two-factor authentication. They would be getting your phone calls. They'd be able to call somebody from your cell phone number. It's an incredibly devastating thing to have happen. Now, it's relatively rare, but it can happen. And the providers are getting better about preventing it. But I would like to encourage all of you to put on your to-do list, call your cell phone provider and ask about porting protection. That's the term of art that will get you to the right person and they'll give you the right advice. Now, I put on the slide here a little information about AT&T and Verizon. On the identity theft website, we've got additional providers, but it doesn't matter who your provider is. Call them and ask about this. One thing to note, if you call AT&T's normal customer service, they kind of scratch their head. But AT&T has a global fraud management number, which I put on here and we have on the website. They understand what you're talking about. And I got to tell you, I called them the other day just to see what they would say. Not only did I get a great answer out of them, but they called me back like 2 hours later with more information. So I was very impressed with that level of support. So this is a little bit in the weeds, but it's one I believe everyone should take in an era when our cell phone numbers were just all stolen. Okay, now's your time to get up and get a drink and go, oh, he's going to talk about passwords, and I apologize for that. But I'm not just going to talk about passwords. I want to talk about a solution that we have to make managing passwords easier. So easy, it's kind of amazing, actually. Now, why are we talking about passwords when we're talking about identity theft? The reason is that if I want to take over your identity, I want to take out big loans in your name. It may be that I just go after your bank accounts, but it may be that I start establishing myself as you in multiple places. I take over first your gym account, and I use that to take over, your store account. And I just sort of work my way around. The point is that I reach a point where I have access to a bunch of your accounts. And pretty soon they start feeding together and they allow a greater access to your personal information. Now, how do you stop that? You stop that by using unique, strong passwords on every account. Now, this gets to be a nightmare because we all have dozens of accounts and nobody wants to remember dozens of passwords. This is why what we usually see happens is someone will go to their gym again and they'll use their UCSD email address as the login. They'll use their standard password they use everywhere because you only want to remember one. And then they go use the same pair of credentials to log into their financial institution. Well, your financial institution may protect those credentials very well, but how much do you want to bet your gym isn't? So by using a different password everywhere, you're going to protect your personal accounts enormously. But to do that is an incredible pain in the hiney. So LastPass is a free piece of software we have licensed for every faculty, staff, and student at UCSD. You can go to lastpass.ucsd.edu. You can see I've got the link up there in the corner. And it's a password manager. Essentially, the way it operates is it stores all your passwords. It associates them with a website. And then when you visit that website, it will plug that login and password into the site. In fact, if you have it running in your browser like I do, there's a little plugin for your browser. It will even generate new passwords for you when you're setting up a new account and store them for you. Once you get it installed in your browser, and there's an app that goes on your cell phone as well. So I do this on my iPhone as well. It gives you a score. It tells you which of your passwords are known to be bad, have been hacked. It will autofill them in for you. It uses two-step login to protect itself. And it's supported by the service desk here at UCSD. So it's an incredibly powerful tool. It can be a little tricky if you're really not computer savvy to set up the first time. So if you are one of those that can get it done without any problem, again, show somebody how you did that. Talk to people how you did it. And if you try LastPass and you hate it because it just doesn't work for you, find another one. There are others out there. And I'd rather have you use any password manager than no password manager. And here's the other one where you're all going to race over to my house with pitchforks and torches. I'm going to ask you to enable multi-factor authentication, what we tend to call two-step login, on all of your personal accounts. The reason I'm doing that is the hard data shows two-step authentication, whether sometimes it's called MFA, 2FA, multi-factor, etc. When we rolled that out here at UCSD, we cut the number of compromised accounts by over 90%. So this is tremendously effective at protecting your accounts. Why would you not do this in your personal life? So what I've given you up at the top of the page there, and again, this is on the identity theft page, is a URL with fairly up-to-date instructions on everything from Amazon to WhatsApp, how to set it up. Start with any of your accounts that touch, spending, PayPal, Amazon, your banks, your credit card. Make sure you have it set up there and then work your way through the rest of them. Now, I know most of you are probably not going to go off and go through all of your accounts and set it up, but really, this is so effective and so essential. And we've already seen cases where it's helped prevent identity theft here at UCSD, where somebody calls the help desk, tries to get a password reset. We send a push to the phone associated with that account. And the person who answers the push isn't the person trying to reset the password, which means somebody is gaming that person's identity, trying to get access to their accounts. This is very serious. This is very important. Please do it. The other link I put on here is just a directory of several hundred common services on the web and where and how they support two-factor authentication. Again, I want to talk a little bit, take a breather for a second before we dive into the last set of recommendations, and encourage you all to be good advocates for your colleagues. Help your colleagues set up LastPass. Sit around and talk with people about how to set up two-step authentication. Set up your Social Security account and your IRS Identity Protection Pin and tell someone about it. I dare say it would be better spent 10 minutes of a staff meeting talking about these things and encouraging people to do some of them than waiting until we have an identity theft and the hours are going to be lost cleaning that up, or days or weeks. So really, we again have 750 people on the call right now. You folks have the power to bring the whole UCSD community along. And I really hope you'll take some time to do that. So let's go a little bit in the weeds. I'll go through these a little more quickly, and then we'll get to some questions and answers. First of all, and I want to spend a little time on this one, beware of scams. I can say in my personal life, my wife and I are probably seeing 5 to 10 times as many spam phone calls and text messages as we used to. I don't know if this is because of the Accellion breach or chance, correlation, causality, we really don't know, but I know that it's out of hand. So a couple of do's and don'ts that you really should follow, because I'm sure you're all getting these too. Don't reply to spam text messages or phone calls. It's really tempting to respond to a text message because it's instinctive. Who is this? Is this really Bob? Well, as soon as you engage in a conversation with these hackers, they're going to find a way to socially engineer, to convince you that they're who they think, trying to convince you they are. And next thing you know, they've got your financial information, they've got your passwords, they got personal information. So just don't respond to them. Similarly, treat your personal information like it's cash. No legitimate organization is going to randomly text you and ask for the last 4 of your Social Security number. I've been getting these all the time lately because my cell phone number is from an Illinois zip code. I get all these text messages from Illinois saying, click here to confirm your Illinois unemployment benefits, which I don't have or need, fortunately, and just send us the last 4 of your social. Just don't provide that information. I always validate through a different channel any contact from somebody who I don't know. And don't click on the links they're sending you. I know it's instinctive. You want to do it. You want to see what it is. Just don't do it. It's just, if something is really important, someone will find another way to get a hold of it and get that information to you. Both the iPhone and Android phones have settings related to blocking calls. They're not always on by default, but for example, you can go into your phone and say, I want to be able to block calls. And then when I get any of these spam calls, I tend to just block them, the number, so I don't get a second call. I don't know if it's helping that much, but it's kind of satisfying to know that I've blocked them. Spend a couple of minutes, put your cell phone number on the do not call registry. Now, let's be honest, the do not call registry has not been a whopping success as a program, but it does cut down on the number of, how to say this, non-criminal spam calls you're going to get. And the reason you want to do that is that way you're getting fewer calls that are going to distract you. When you're getting so many of these, it's easy to respond instinctively, and then you've made a mistake, you've responded with something, you've answered something, and you just don't want to do that. So spend a couple of minutes, put yourself on the do not call registry. Now, earlier, I also mentioned to call your cell phone provider and talk to them about alerts and call blocking that you can do, and port protection. Many of them, if not most of them, offer other call blocking services and security services. So I signed up about a year ago with AT&T for theirs, and I wouldn't say it's terrific, but it's probably 20 to 30% of the spam calls I get now. The caller ID says spam risk, and I don't even answer those. I just send them right to decline. So call your carrier, see what features they offer, and take advantage of them. And the last one here is, if you really want, again, that little bit of satisfaction of reporting somebody, it turns out there is a way to do this on all the providers. It's called 7726, which spells out spam. You can forward a text message that's suspicious to that number, when I do it, AT&T writes back and says, what's the number that sent that to you? I give them that. And then they go off and put it in their automated system to see if it's a suspicious number that ought to be blocked. I don't know if it matters, but if enough of us do it, I think it'll help. The last point I want to make about scams. We saw a bunch of these right after the breach was announced, and I suspect we will see more of these. People will contact you through email or text or phone call saying, we have your personal data as part of the OP data breach, and if you don't pay us money, we're going to release it. These are not legitimate threats. If your data was part of the OP data breach, it's already out there. These are extortion. So if you get one of these, I recommend you send it to our identity theft line so that we track it and know whether or not they're happening. So keep that in mind. That's a lot for the scams page, but we're seeing so much of this. It's very important that you are really judicious about your text messaging and phone calls. So the last page I'll get into here on the weeds a little bit, 3 items quickly. You may see as you're looking around one of the services that offer to remove your data from the web. And one of the questions that came in repeatedly during the registration is, how do I remove my data from the dark web? You can't remove your data from the dark web. It is by definition criminal, and criminals aren't going to take your data down. Now, on the normal, non-criminal web, there are services out there that say they will remove your personal information from aggregators that capture it and resell it. Some of these are a little effective. I'm very skeptical of them. I don't think any of them have staying power. I think once your data is one of these aggregators, it's going to stay there. I'm not talking data that was lost in the breach. I just mean information about you, your address, your phone number. If you Google yourself online, just the name, you'll quickly find sites that offer to tell you all about yourself. And usually what they're trying to do is sell you a background report on yourself or on a person. So just be wary. I'm very skeptical these are worth investing in. Your cell phone number. One of the things that drives me nuts on social media, when you see something like someone says, hey, I went to high school with your sister. Do you have a way to get a hold of her? And then somebody says, oh yeah, here's her phone number. So typically when those kinds of things are posted, they're now on the public web, which means they're available to everybody, the public and criminal organizations. So this is just, and I know this is a little bit of the cart or the horse having left the barn 12 years ago, but be careful about posting your personal information. But your cell phone number in particular is one that is used for a lot of scam. And what you can consider doing, Google Voice is a service that Google provides, not through the university, but through private Google accounts that will give you a phone number. Now, all that phone number does is forward any calls to it to your cell phone, but you can then use that Google Voice number as sort of your public phone number. And that way, if the time comes, you need to change it because you're getting nothing but spam on it, you can do that. So just, I provided a link there. You can take a look at that. I don't know if it's worth the trouble for most people, but I wanted to make sure you're aware that's a possibility. And then finally, this is my last point before we dive into the question and answer. Share the identitytheft.ucsd.edu link in your email. Share it at staff meetings. Be an identity theft influencer. I just can't say this enough, that you all as a community are the way that we are going to protect ourselves as a community from identity theft. That actually can help a lot. I and the university have very little we can actually do to protect individuals. But as a community, by sharing knowledge and being there for one another, I can't imagine a better reason for being part of a community, especially a higher education community. So with that, I'll say thanks and remind you that you can always email me questions. I'm happy to answer them. The identity theft reports, again, only identity theft reports. Questions about the breach, send the communications at ucop.edu. I wanted to acknowledge some input from Steve Thrush and of course, my colleagues Sam and Allison from Berkeley and Santa Barbara, who gave similar presentations on their campus. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. And let's see, where are we here? What is the dark web and what goes on there? Oh, that's a terrific question. The dark web is a portion of the internet that is not accessible through a normal web browser. It's not like you type in www.darkweb.com and you suddenly get a bunch of criminal organizations. These are websites that are designed specifically to avoid visibility and to not be searchable by the Googles or the Bing search engines of the world. And as a result, there's an awful lot of criminal activity that takes place there where drugs are sold, for example, or weapons are sold, or information is sold. What frequently happens on the dark web is someone will take over an account, say, at any university or in a private business, and then they'll post to other registered criminals, believe it or not, and say, for X amount of dollars, I will give you access to this account that I hacked into. And then a better hacker will buy that and hack their way a little further into the system, and they'll turn around and resell it to somebody else. So it's basically a invisible place for criminal functions to talk to one another. Now, there are small amounts of the dark web that are a little more gray than criminal, people that are just trying to avoid scrutiny and visibility. But in general, the dark web is largely a criminal operation. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. Let's see, what else do we have here in the questions? Oh, I wanted to make sure to point out again, LastPass. I want to underscore this. Someone asked if this is difficult to set up. LastPass is not difficult to set up, but it can take a little getting used to how it interoperates with websites. And so again, if you're computer savvy, or if you're comfortable doing this, spend a few minutes, figure it out, show somebody. It's an incredibly nice tool and be very helpful. Let's see, what else do we have here on the list that was asked? Oh, one question about the breach that I do want to address. Many of you have asked, is OP going to be extending the period of the credit monitoring service from a year to longer? I have no information on that. All I can tell you is that many of us have asked that they do that. But if you believe that 1 year isn't adequate, I'd encourage you to just tell them that and ask for the system to consider extending it. Bunch of other questions out there. How to reduce fears knowing your info is on the dark web? You know, this actually goes to the heart of what we're talking about today. I can't say anything to you that is going to make you go, oh, phew, not a problem. But what I'm hoping will happen is that if you go through these steps and you follow what I've talked about here, you will, A, protect yourself from most of it, and B, as I said earlier, when you can't do something about something, that's when the anxiety really ramps up. At least for me, I know it is. This is why if I'm having trouble sleeping, I'll sometimes just get up and get an hour of work in, and I feel so much better. This is the same kind of thing. Now, this is probably too much to do in a sitting. So chunk it up. Spend half an hour tonight and get your identity protection pin set up. Spend 20 minutes tomorrow, get your My Social Security set up. Spend an hour over the weekend setting up your multi-factor on multiple accounts. And then Monday, talk about it with friends. Make sure your family is doing it. Let's see, what else do we have on here that we can talk about? Security training in the wings. As you know, the system requires mandatory security training, which is sadly very ineffective. We are working on some better training for the community. That's another reason to keep check on the cybersecurity.ucsd.edu website. We'll put information there about any additional training services that we're working on. Is there a cost to setting a credit freeze or an alert? No, there's no cost at all involved. The only real work involved here is the trouble of doing it. And especially with a freeze, you have to do that on all three credit bureaus. And by the way, none of these will affect your credit rating. Well, remember, part of what you're doing here is you're protecting your credit score. They're protecting your accounts. So, you know, don't worry about the cost. It's a little bit of time, but again, I'm going to emphasize repeatedly, I feel that a credit freeze is a wise thing to do. You just have to be prepared to deal with it, with lifting up when you do need access to your credit. Do you need thaw your credit to get it? No, I have a credit freeze in place, and yet I can still get my credit report. So getting a credit freeze doesn't suddenly lock you out of everything. And in fact, it's very easy to get a credit report. So like I said, how long does it take to set up a credit freeze and turn thaw if needed? Last time I set one, I think it took 20 minutes, something like that. By the time I sort of read the instructions carefully and put it in place, I don't remember how long it took before it went into effect. It may have like been a day later or something like that. And a freeze is very quick to lift as well. Some of the financial agencies will provide you with a quicker way to sort of turn it on and off. So again, talk to your banks, talk to your financial institutions, and see what they can help you with. Oh, should we be freezing credit for our kids? Boy, that's a tough one. My gut feeling is you probably should, but I have to say I would have to check and see on the wisdom of that. I can't imagine that your kid's credit is being checked very often. You know, my knee-jerk response is to say, why not? But I would have to say that let me take do a little bit of research on that, and we'll get it added to the FAQ as soon as we can. What can I do to protect my children? Yeah, everyone has been asking about this. It's really pretty much the same set of steps for your children. Children tend not to be as big a target for identity theft because they don't have any credit and people are trying to make money. These are all about scams about making money. And so I don't lose too much sleep over children being targeted. Now, as soon as I say that, I'm sure someone is going to email me that their children have their identity stolen and bad things happen. So I know we live in a world where everything's possible. But I think the key here is that you're going to have to really work with your children to make sure that they are trained as they grow up and mature into a digital world, the kinds of skills we're talking about. You know, we all grew up being trained by our parents not to look both ways before crossing the street, not to take rides from strangers. But for a variety of reasons, that same kind of savvy and training never really happened in the digital world. And as a parent, spending some time with your children and helping them with that strikes me as where we are today and what's going to happen in the future. Mike, do you have to choose between my Social Security and the IRS thing, or can you do both? Oh, you can absolutely do both. I have both done. If I were going to do one, I would do the IRS Identity Protection Pin, because that is just such an abused fraud that we're seeing, the filing of fake tax returns. But there's no reason to do both of them. What would happen? Here's the last, I think we have time for 2 more questions. What would happen if you leave UCSD with your LastPass account? You can go sign up for I don't know if it's free or inexpensive, but a personal LastPass account through the company. And then you can move all of your accounts from one to the other. I actually have both. And you can actually link your personal LastPass with your university account so that I'm only logged into usually my university LastPass account but I have access to both. It's actually very easy, and it works really well. Mike, can social media use or carelessness be used in identity theft? Absolutely. Social media is, the source of and solution to all of our problems. People post everything on social media. And for someone of my age, I think that's crazy. But what's interesting is there have been study after study that show even millennials, young kids, high school kids working on social media actually want to protect their privacy a lot. It's just for them, the notion of protecting their privacy is different than it is for you or me, of my generation at least. So make sure you've taken advantage of having two-factor authentication set up on your social media accounts. It goes quadruple for Facebook. Make sure that you are posting to the community you want to post to. Again, it's very easy to get sloppy and post to friends of friends of friends on Facebook. And next thing you know, you've effectively shared it with 1 billion people when you meant to send it to 25 people in your neighborhood. So I would really put a lot of time into protecting social media. Despite the OP data breach, social media is still one of the original sources of personal information getting out into the wild and used for identity theft. Remember, if someone knows your favorite city, your mother's name, especially her maiden name, which is the one that everyone uses, they can start calling organizations and saying, hey, I know, here's my social, here's my phone number, here's my mother's maiden name, here's the last 3 addresses I lived at. Pretty soon they'll have access to your accounts. So absolutely protect that quite a bit. Last question, and then we're going to have to go. What advice do you have for strong passwords? What I recommend is you stop using passwords. Use passphrases. A passphrase is 3 to 5 words separated by spaces. Throw in a number and a character here and there. But if you pick a phrase like this, you can remember a phrase much easier than you can remember a password. The phrase is very long, 4 words separated by spaces. It's infinitely harder to crack by hackers. And it just, like I say, it's easy to remember and type. So when I access my LastPass account, which is the only password I know, I use a long passphrase to access it. And that combined with two-factor, it's not going to get hacked. So with that, I think we're done. And I want to thank everyone again. This has been terrific. I hope this was helpful for you. And let me stop sharing. And please visit the site, identitytheft.ucsd.edu, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.